Hi, and welcome to episode 44 of the Breaking Bio podcast. I'm Morgan Jackson, a PhD student at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada. And today we have two very finely bearded gentlemen joining us today. But before we get to them, we'll introduce Stephen.
I'm Stephen Hamlin, postdoc at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia.
And as I mentioned, we have two excellently bearded fellows joining me today, and the totally empty Stephen. So we've got Derek Hennen, and we've
Wait, the empty me? What?
You're lacking in the facial hair, so that's where it is. And your soul.
This is what a theoretician looks like, all right?
Just get one of those dry erase markers and draw it on there for you.
This is awesome. So, as they're already chiming in, we're ripping on Stephen. We've got Derek Hennen, who's an MSc student, and Mike Skvarla, who's a PhD student at the University of Arkansas. So say hi, guys, and tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Hey. Yeah, I can go first. So I'm a PhD student at Arkansas. I'm working on mites, mostly, but I also recently started a trapping project that I'm collecting all arthropods in like a 2-acre plot. So I work on everything.
And I'm a master's student. I just got to the university about 2 months ago, and my project is on the endemic arthropods of Arkansas. And so right now I don't really have a specific project I'm working on. And so in the meantime, I'm just sort of following through with some of my own millipede projects that I kind of brought here.
So you guys are both doing some phonistics work. So we'll start there, and then we'll get into the M's, I guess. So
okay.
You mentioned you're working on Arkansas Endemics. And Mike, you're working general on just a survey and such. So why don't you guys tell us a little bit about the ecology of Arkansas, which is maybe something people don't think about very often, and what makes it special or unique for why you guys want to look into the arthropods of these areas.
Okay. I can take that.
Okay, yeah.
Right, so up here in the northern part of Arkansas, we're in the Ozark Highlands, which is actually encompasses a lot of Missouri as well, but it's been unglaciated, submerged in water, so it's been an island since basically land came on Earth, or Jesus Christ, since animals came onto land, and so it's really a hotspot for endemism.
So what is endemism? So perhaps we should explain that for the non-biologists like Stephen in the crowd.
Oh, endemism is wow.
Son, we're having a math lesson is what we're having.
Endemism is when an organism, such as a plant or an animal, only occurs in one specific location. So in this case, only occurs in the Ozark Highlands.
And so what makes Arkansas and like the Highlands, the Ouachita Mountains, which are sort of in central Arkansas and go over to Oklahoma a bit as well, is that it's sort of acted as a refuge for species whenever seas have risen, and so those species have been able to go up higher in the mountains to find refuges where to live, and then when the seas recede, then they're kind of able to go down further. And so it's acted as a pretty good place for speciation, and so that's what I'm learning about with my project and kind of looking at that. And so I'm going to different sites in the interior highlands as well as the Ozarks and the Ouachita Mountains, and kind of looking to see where I can find some of the endemics that we've already identified in the state.
Why did I talk? Why didn't you just say that from the beginning?
You've been here longer.
Oh,
so you can handle it.
So the new upstart is taking over.
Get the elbows out there, guys. By the end of this, they won't be sharing a headphone.
I was just going to ask, is the fossil record in that area really interesting?
Probably.
I don't know.
Probably.
I asked the bug.
I don't know. Yeah. No, we've actually been looking at getting into some of the arthropod fossils in the area. One of the species of trichnotarbids, which is this extinct group of chelicerates related to spiders, scorpions, spicinuleids, and things, was described from Fayetteville, right where we're at, from some coal shale. And we've got amber deposits and apparently some really nice coal conglomerates that produce fossils, back from the Carboniferous up through tertiary fossils. So apparently it's pretty good, but aside from knowing that much, that's about it. That's all I know.
Cool. So as I as I was mentioning, we actually have a listener question that we can actually get to because it's on topic and all that. So I'm going to throw it up on the screen for those that are watching live, and we'll read it out for anybody that's listening to your iTunes. So Andy Warren, who's an entomologist from Florida, asks, how many endemic arthropods are estimated in Arkansas, given that Missouri, Oklahoma, and Arkansas kind of spread over the Ozarks? So how many are actually just Arkansas?
So that's kind of a neat question. There was a book published, I forget exactly what it was called. It was Endemics of Arkansas or something like that. And they listed a lot of things in it. And we're coming to find as we search more and more that arthropods that were, they claimed were endemic and they found only down in the Ouachita Highlands, we're finding up in the Ozarks. And if we find them here, there's a good chance they're probably in Missouri. So really it's just a case of nobody's looked because most of these things are, small flightless invertebrates, and nobody cares about things in leaf litter. There are some very well documented endemic vertebrates. We have a couple salamander species. There's a bunch of plant species that only occur down in the Ouachitas. But my feeling is a lot of the arthropods that we're surveying for and that are said to be endemic either aren't or are more widespread than is published just because nobody's looked. Which makes it really cool because, we can find things all over the place.
So I guess what we're saying is we don't really have a number, but for my particular project, we've identified about a dozen, which range from flies, small beetles, Hymenoptera, and things like that. So that's sort of what I'm looking for, and these are things that mostly occur in the leaf litter. And in the book that Mike mentioned, that kind of listed the endemic arthropods of Arkansas and other species, would you say around 50 or so, maybe more than that?
Yeah.
And so that was published around like 1995, and so it could range from like 50 to 200, I guess, and then some of our research will probably kind of take that down a little bit. Like, for example, one of the millipedes that was described, Fayetteville actually had a researcher around the 1950s or so named Nell Cossey, and she did a lot of publishing with millipedes, and she described some species, but some of those since then have been kind of synonymized with some other species, and so things like that, it'll probably be a little bit lower of a count. But there are more here than I thought. When I had first heard of Arkansas and had seen the listing for the master's position to come down here, I was coming from Ohio, and I thought, Arkansas. I passed through there on my way to Texas once, and it didn't really seem all that interesting, but there's actually a lot since I found out. And so hopefully with all the mountains and kind of the geologic history of the place, we'll find more and be able to get something of a more specific number.
So when, for those of us who don't tramp around in the bush, or who aren't biologists listening at home, when you say something like, okay, so, the species is endemic to Arkansas, how do you actually know that?
Well, you don't. I mean,
it's kind of like just how you figure out the range of anything else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for certain things like salamanders and big plants that are, visible and people like to look at, then it's pretty easy. You can say, we've only found this salamander on this peak. It's not on any of the surrounding peaks. It's not anywhere else in this mountain range. We haven't found it in the lowlands. That's pretty easy. When you get to small things like leaf litter arthropods, it's a lot more difficult. And I mean, even after you've intensively sampled an area, if you're not hitting the right microhabitats, you still might be missing it. It might be present where you're looking, and it's a lot sketchier when you start talking about things that people either haven't sampled or are small and easy to miss.
So the caveat to it is, to the best of our knowledge, this is the only place where they occur.
Yeah.
And so with a lot of the stuff like nearby Oklahoma and Missouri, those might harbor some of the species we think are endemics, or they might not. It just depends on who's out there sampling, if they know what to look for, and if they're able to identify things accurately.
Yeah, and when you say, a lot of it might come down to, well, they're endemic to the Ozarks or the interior highlands, and not necessarily, this geopolitical region that we call Arkansas. But, when you're trying to get funding from the state agencies, it's a lot easier to say, well, they're endemic to Arkansas, give us the money to go look at them. They don't care about what's up in Missouri, even if, the geographic boundaries are more important to the animals than political boundaries.
I think it's a failure of the animals, frankly.
But it brings up an important point, though, that if you guys were to accidentally step over the border into Missouri or Oklahoma and pick up the insect there, and you have to record it from there, does it take away a little bit from, I don't know, the mystique of these insects or the importance of them in any way?
Not really. I mean, I kind of already just think of it as the physiogeographic portion, like the mountainous regions, like the Ozarks, rather than just, oh, this is only Arkansas or this is Oklahoma. I mean, it's kind of cool to think of it that way and think, wow, my state has this species that doesn't occur anywhere else, and that's really cool. But I don't know, I think it kind of makes it even more neat, because then you can bring in other people, and then it's like, hey, there's some people out in Oklahoma, you should look for these things.
Yeah, and I think in the end, where they occur, the story that you can tell with their range is the interesting part, not necessarily like, oh, they're just in Arkansas. It's like people that, I kind of feel like it's like people that get upset when you sink bark beetles into weevils. And they're like, oh, Scelididae's not a family anymore. Like, who gives a crap? Like, they're weevils. That's really cool.
And I mean, if you're pedantic, it might take away from it. But what's neat about the Ozarks and the Washtas is that there are some species that their closest relatives are known from the Appalachians. And so maybe that's not endemic or both species occur. But I mean, that's pretty cool for biogeography that the same species can occur in the mountains of Arkansas as well as the mountains of, say, Tennessee, even though they're pretty far away from each other.
So I'm usually interested when we have guests on in what you might call scientist origin stories. So I'm assuming there was no accident with the radioactive spider, but how did you guys end up here at the University of Arkansas studying arthropods? Like, what led you to this point?
That's where the money was, to be honest. Well, I started a master's here. Well, I started a master's here years ago, and of the 5 or 6 places I applied to, Ashley, my boss, was the only one that had money and could fund me. So I was like, well, you're going to pay me. That's where I'm going to go. And then, within 2 weeks of being here, during my undergrad, I told my one professor I was never going to work on mites. They were stupid. Who does that? And within 2 weeks, they convinced me that they were awesome. So.
So it's not like the sort of thing where you were, 7 years old and found your first mite and thought, hey, this is cool, and wanted to study it forever.
No, that's how I got into entomology in general, though. Mm-hmm. I had to make a collection for Cub Scouts or something, and my dad took me out at February and showed me some hibernating ichneumonids under some bark. I'm like, this is the best thing ever. I'm finding insects in the middle of winter in a snowstorm, and I was hooked ever since. So, no, the mites is a new thing, though.
I'll ask this of all three of you, because you've all got roots here, but do you think entomology is one of those fields that people tend to be into as a kid? Is it one of those things that you have a lifelong passion for, or do some people just stumble into it?
I think you can definitely find a lot of people who, for them, that was the case. But like for my origin story, if we're going to that, I didn't like insects at all until college, and I had an ecology class, and I distinctly remember saying to myself, I'm never going to like insects, they're lame. And then in the next year, I was studying insects and ended up doing my capstone and all the project on that. And it was good because I went to Marietta College in Southeast Ohio, and there's a really good faculty there, and they kind of helped me and led me through there and kind of got me hooked on entomology. But if we want to go back even further, I think it was Pokemon
was your first
for me.
taste for free?
Huh? Yeah, exactly.
Your first bug's free.
Yeah, pretty much. But I mean, when I was little, I played a lot of Pokemon, and so now it's just kind of like I'm doing that, but in real life. So maybe that was a start for me. But I've met a lot of people who didn't get into them until just later, and they happened to want them.
Yeah, I think most of the students in our department, or at least a lot of them, had some kind of intro to entomology courses in undergrad and thought, oh, insects are cool, I'll do a master's or a PhD in entomology. I think I'm probably one of the oddballs that just never got out of it from being a kid.
It's split from my experiences that there's maybe not 50-50, but there's definitely a population of people or entomologists that have been into it since they were, the size of an insect, and then there's those of us that have stumbled into it and regret not learning about them earlier and having all those wasted years. But yeah, it's an interesting split that way where some are, born with it and some are chosen later.
Some are called to it.
Yes.
There's just so much wrong with that. I'm not even going to go there. You handed the golden beetle at one point or something?
Well, we're not supposed to talk about it, so.
Oh. Initiation ceremonies. I don't know what that looks like for entomologists, but I don't think I want any part of that.
Now that we're into the entomology bit, so we're going to talk a little bit about what you guys are mostly passionate about. Not to say you're not passionate about the other stuff. Mostly just talking about the organisms themselves. So, Mike, we'll start with you. So you've got into mites, not intentionally, essentially.
Yeah.
So what was it about mites that really drove you to spend the next 6 to 8 years of your life working on them nonstop?
Honestly, it started with one family during my master's, and what I did my master's work on, and I kind of learned, all of the related families and then higher groupings, and just kind of went from there. So the one family, the Cunaxidae, they're these generalist predators. They run around in leaf litter and soil and on plants and stuff. And the palps, the pedipalps, are modified into these raptorial grasping organs that are half as long as the body. And so, they're these little lions that just run around and grab stuff and spear it. And I just thought that was so cool. And
the gladiators of the undergrowth.
Yeah, except they're tiny.
Yeah, very tiny.
Even the biggest ones you can barely see without a microscope. But from there I just started branching out, and as I'd sort samples, I think, oh, that might looks cool. What is it? And then spend the whole day keying it out, and then learning it. And I basically like that. I liked leaf litter first, and then mites, and
cool.
Yeah.
I liked leaf litter first.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in leaf litter. It's the poor man's rainforest.
That's very true, especially if you're looking at the really tiny stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of mites out there that from what I know, which is pretty much zero, that there's a lot out there we don't know about mites because they're critically understudied.
Oh
from
yeah.
what I can tell. What do you think is going to be kind of the way of the future for mite biology and mite futures?
I mean, honestly, a lot of it is just still descriptive taxonomy. So just going back to my master's, of the 30 to 35 species I found in the family, there was only 8 described. Everything else was undescribed. So I mean, how can you even start to talk about biology until you have a name for it? And Cunaxids are one of the better studied groups of mites. So 8
out of 35 is actually doing pretty good.
Pretty good. I mean, there's some groups that are better studied, things that are orobatids, which are detritivores and help in nutrient turnover, are pretty well studied. Things that are pests, feather mites and whatnot, are fairly well studied. But as far as leaf litter predators that nobody cares about, the Cunaxids have been pretty well worked. And yeah, 8 out of 35 is pretty damn low. So I think we know life histories for 5 of the 300 species or something like that.
That's ridiculously low.
Yeah, most of them are described only from adult females, so we don't even know what males look like, or immature stages or eggs. So
yeah. Well, I mean, I was surprised to find the other day when I was after walking through the bush and getting a couple of legs full of chiggers that I actually looked up what they were. So chiggers are little parasitic jackasses that bite people.
Yes.
And they're really, really itchy
Yep.
if you haven't experienced them. But then they grow up and they become totally different. They have nothing to do with people, and they're herbivores that are actually kind of pests as well. So
Yeah.
is this kind of like a common theme within the mite world where they're totally different ecologically as, well, we don't really know, I guess, but so far from what you know, is there a lot of ecological differentiation between the larval stages and the adult stages?
It depends on what you mean by widespread. So chiggers are in a group, the parasitogona, that in the larger group, the Trembidiforms, which is half of the mite tree, or so, they're the biggest group. They're half of the known species. So yes and no. Taxonomically, it's restricted to just the parasitiforms that have a parasitic larvae, and then Deutonymph and adult that are predators. But they're the most diverse and the most speciose. So depends on what how you want to ask the question.
As with all things in biology.
Yeah.
A non-answer.
No, another lab mate of ours worked on terrestrial parasitogones. So our lab knows a pretty good deal about them. They're actually really cool. Chiggers, the ones that bite mammals, are maybe the minority. There's a lot more of them that are specialists on insects and parasitize insects as larvae, but do the exact same thing.
I feel bad for the insects because I'm still itching, and that was 2.5 weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're the absolute worst. Anyways, now that I'm itchy all over again.
Going into the forest, right?
It's actually the grasslands is where the worst chiggers. The
out
forest
loud.
is not a problem.
Look, nature is an issue.
State of the map.
Nature wants to get you.
Yeah, nature wants to eat you.
Yeah. So look, if you're not going with a flamethrower, don't go at all.
So now that I'm itchy all over from thinking about mites again, Derek, we'll talk a little bit about millipedes. So that's kind of your thing, is the millipedes, your claim to fame online, I guess we could say.
What kind of a segue was
They both start with M.
that I'm itchy all over.
It's true, man. If you haven't had chiggers, you don't know how itchy it gets and how.
Oh no,
They're so bad.
Oh, don't come to Arkansas. We have lots of them.
Oh gosh.
Well, I'm not gonna say that was on my travel list, anyways. But
I'm gonna interrupt Derek's response just for 1 second, because not only do we have chiggers, but we're also one of the hot spots in the U.S. for ticks. Not only tick density and number of tick species, but also number of tick-borne diseases and percentage of ticks that carry tick-borne diseases.
You guys should work for the Arkansas Travel Board, because you guys are making this like the best place to go.
Yeah. Our boss recently got over a tick-borne disease this summer. So.
Jesus.
We were actually out in the field a couple weeks ago, and I was walking through, I guess it was sort of grasslandy, and I passed by a blade of grass, and then I felt something on my ankle, so I looked down. I thought it would just be like, I don't know, something to just wipe off, but it was just a mass of baby ticks, just all on my ankle. And so there were maybe 80 or more, and they're so tiny. And this is, oh gosh. Yeah.
See,
it was cool.
Math is looking pretty good now, isn't it?
As opposed to a tick-filled ankle, yes.
Yeah, but there's still something about field work that's awesome. Like, you're out in the woods and getting paid for it.
We say that a lot when we're out.
I still can't get over that. Like, the taxpayers are paying me to be out here. Why not?
Getting eaten alive and get diseased.
Take
more of their money through healthcare.
It is what it is.
I feel like we should have a series of inspirational posters based on this.
Yeah.
Tick-borne diseases for science.
For sure. So anyways, Derek, we'll go to something a little more tame, maybe. So
okay.
What was it about millipedes that got you so interested in them?
Well, I never really paid attention to them until I went to a workshop that was taught by Bill Shear, who's a millipede researcher from Virginia. And it was just a couple of days, and it was a crash course for a bunch of people who had never learned about millipedes before. And so we learned how to identify them, where you can collect them, and stuff like that. And that was pretty much the only resource that I had available to me. And so what was the best out of that was that I got a key, and so I could figure out orders and families. Unfortunately, if you look for millipedes online, or even in the scientific literature, you aren't really going to find many pictures or anything that's helpful unless you're already a specialist. And so it was kind of hard scrabble for a couple years there before I really knew what I was doing. But now I've kind of been able to figure out what my local species are and how to identify them for most of the groups. And so what I've been working on is sort of taking that and putting it like on my blog and around to other places so that if someone wants to learn more about millipedes, they're actually able to. Because even in the scientific literature, say you're describing a new millipede species, until recently, the only thing you've really had to include are the gonopods, which are modified legs that are used, those are the sexual structures, and so they're used for sperm transfer to the female. And so only the males have them, and so that's how a lot of millipede identification is done. And so all that previous authors would do would pretty much be to just include drawings of the gonopods, maybe a photo if you were lucky. And so it's really tough to figure out what a millipede is when you find the species described in a paper and all it gives you are these weird-looking legs. And so, I mean, that was my first exposure, and I found out that not a whole lot of people were working on them. I mean, worldwide, it's a pretty understudied field. But recently there have been more people getting into it, which is good, and you're getting more photos online, better information online, which is all great. But as of right now, there's still not a whole lot of people studying them. And so it's like, well, maybe I can move into this and kind of start working on them since no one else is. So at the very least, I can get a couple of easy publications before I have to pull out my hair trying to figure out what is going on with millipedes. And so a lot of the stuff, I'm just sort of looking at ecology of them and also taxonomy. And so I just kind of happened into it and kind of tripped into millipedes, as it were.
Niche partitioning by accident. That's the best way academia goes. All right. Well, we're almost out of time, so unfortunately we're gonna have to cut it off. But how about we get your one favorite fact about mites, Mike, and your one favorite fact about millipedes that not many people know, and then we'll have to go from there.
Okay, mites. They're everywhere. So you'll find them on plants, in the grass, in dirt. They'll follow tree roots down meters and meters into the soil. They're in water, fresh water, in salt water. Unlike insects, they've been found in deep sea trenches down to 3,000 feet below sea level. A lot of them get around through aerial dispersal, so wind will pick them up, and they'll be, 1,000 feet up in the air, caught in the wind, and then they'll get dropped down and from here to like Europe. So they're absolutely everywhere, and I just think that's really cool.
That's pretty cool.
And your face, you've got them in your eyebrows.
I was hoping you'd bring them up.
Yeah. Everybody listening, you have them. 99.9% of humans carry them in your eyebrows, so tough nuggets if you don't like that.
And there goes our audience.
How about you, Derek? What's your millipede fact of the day?
Well, when you look for millipedes, you don't have to be in the field, and so you're in these nice places with a lot of trees and shade, so it doesn't get too hot. Probably my favorite fact about them is that a lot of them will fluoresce under UV light, and so it's not bioluminescence. You get a UV flashlight or something, shine them on a lot of the millipedes in the order Polydesmata, and they just glow. It's so cool. The first time I saw this was during the fall, and I was just out looking around in the leaf litter at night. I switched on the UV flashlight, and it just lit up. They were like little trains going over the leaves, and it's just something you would never see during the daylight, and that really got me started into millipedes.
Cool.
But there are some species that do bioluminesce, and they're in the genus Motixia in California, and it's beautiful. It's just mind-blowing.
Well, that's awesome. So, guys, we're pretty much out of time, but where can people follow along and learn more about millipedes and mites as you guys go through your research?
Well, I keep a blog at normalbiology.blogspot.com, and I'm also on Twitter at Derek Hennen.
I don't have a blog yet. I've been kicking around the idea of starting one. Actually, I have started one. This is going to be the big reveal because I haven't told anybody, including my family. But I'm getting into falconry, so I've started a blog for that. Kind of just my journey through the apprenticeship for that, and so that's cool. That's at skvarlafalconry.wordpress.com.
Cool.
But you can follow me in all of my mite-related adventures. Mostly I just retweet people on Twitter. But I'm in Skvarla36.
Sweet.
So there you go.
Awesome. Well, we'll put that stuff online. So I think it's great that we're ending with the fact that you're never alone without your mites and that millipedes are having a rave in the forest when you're not there. So
Cool.
Thanks to everybody for listening to this episode of Breaking Bio. You can find us at breakingbio.com, or you can find us on Twitter at breakingbio. So join us next week when we'll have an all-new musical guest, and
What?
it's going to be awesome and off the hook. So stop by next week. But thanks anyways, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Stay in school, kids.
So you can turn out like us.